Well, hey everybody, hope you're doing well, having a good day, all that stuff. Today I want to talk about Marx. Oh, the scary name Marx. Oh, why don't we just do away with the name? Isn't there a branding issue with Marx? These are the thoughts that I had before I found out more of the things that Marx actually said, and I was like, man, that seems really correct, even for today. Maybe we should give this guy some credit for seeing it 170 years before the present. Anyway, I'm not here to suck Marx's cock. I'm here to tell you about one of the seminal parts of his theory about capital, how capital works, his seminal work, which was never really completed, called Capital. Marx was very interested in economics, and he combined that with his training in philosophy, specifically Hegelian philosophy. Now, I don't think we're going to have to delve too deep into Hegelian philosophy, thank God. Thank God who is not in heaven, because it can get a little bit complex. But what I want to talk about is actually a relatively simple component of Marxist theories that I think you don't even need a socialist revolution in order to benefit from, embody. I think small-scale local action on this particular one thing, even down to your own individual choices in life, which is, there is individualism in socialism, I promise, but there is a lot of emphasis on group dynamics as well. But even if you're a little bit, hesitant to put your, dip your toes in the water of collectivism, this is an aspect of Marxist thought that is really potentially very self-helpy in a good way. So what is this theory? It's the one in the title, Marx labor theory of value. So really quickly, and I'm going to link to some things that go deeper into theories of value, because I'm not an economist. I'm not even trying to share things that I think are necessarily new. I'm just trying to synthesize my collection of information about stuff to try to share maybe a particular worldview. Before Marx, there were theories of value that had a lot more to do with agriculture. So for example, there was a theory of value that all value ultimately came from the land. This is actually kind of a theory of value that's circling back and being prominent in today's kind of overcrowded world. There's theories of value. That's the main point in economics. And they're not always completely objective. They depend on the situation of the time. So Marx is writing about this transition from agriculture into industrial work, where there is this very kind of clear divide between those that own the means of production and those who are working the means of production. And because the machines on their own don't produce anything unless they are labored over by people, Marx theorizes that value comes from labor itself. Now, there's obviously some holes you can see in this theory. In Marx's labor theory of value, machines add literally no value, whereas we can obviously intuitively feel that that's not true because a machine can augment the value of a particular laborer. And we can also criticize that maybe, as Baudrillard did, that Marx is even kind of buying in too much to the capitalist production mindset when he theorizes that value comes from labor and not other things that are a little bit less concrete in terms of the actual marketplace. So those are potential criticisms of this. However, I feel like the labor theory of value continues to hold and be very strong because truly, when you break economics down, economics is the flow of value. It's the flow of value between people. And what do people find valuable? They're either going to find value in kind of raw materials that are rich in potential, but require labor to bring out the value of, or they're going to value things that have already had a lot of labor put into them because, again, the labor increases the value. So I think when you do think in terms of, especially when it relates to human markets, and there can be markets outside of capitalism, but in capitalist markets, you're really thinking about there being raw goods. There's labor that transforms the raw goods into things that people, at least in theory, need. And so I think that this is actually fascinating because when we think about money as having an exchange with value itself, being a placeholder for value in order to convert the value of something into just sort of these fungible, discrete tokens that can be applied elsewhere. Well, it's all very interesting because you don't necessarily have to be making cash money in order to be increasing the value of the things that you have, right? I think this is obvious in the modern world where, of course, there's a very large and successful unproductive class that does very little apart from own things and watches as the value of those things increases, but not under their own labor. But I kind of want to talk about the non-exploitative potential for this as well, because truly, like, so I've spent a lot of time camping in the woods, living in the woods, and I was doing this for mental health reasons that extended beyond just pure, like, what can work in a capitalist economy. But I've also always been obsessed with how to be successful. I think it's especially valuable since I wanted a career in the arts. So it's like, okay, well, how do I actually do that, right? So I've always been very interested. It's very interesting to think, like, if you have raw materials, you're just out in the woods, but you're transforming those raw materials into goods that at least in theory you can later sell, then you've increased the value of the things that you have, right? So even though you haven't withdrawn from your investment yet in the form of selling whatever that value is, in the form of a commodity product, or in the vast majority of the cases for me, service component where I actually show up and play music or record for something specific, all of that stuff is nonetheless a result of something that could be done in isolation of society. I guess this is what I'm saying. So economy is complex because it is the flow of value, but you don't just have to exchange in order to increase your value. There's ways that you can increase the value of the things you have if you own the base means of producing with those things, if you have the ability and energy to put labor into increasing the value of those things. So obviously this is, like, just be the factory owner, that could be a reduction of this mindset. But I think there's an even more spiritual interpretation of this value system, which is when it comes to deciding how to allocate the limited number of hours that we have, especially productive hours that we have, I think a lot of the time we fall victim to thinking that productive time is time spent doing something for a wage. Right? Now, the problem with this inherently is that whenever you are working for an employer, you're getting paid less than the value you're creating. That's what makes you a net benefit to the company in order to employ. You are getting paid less than the value that you can create for the company. This gets pretty absurd when you think about how the largest companies could literally be making like 10 times what they're paying their workers per hour. It gets kind of insane when you just think about how valuable the human mind and body are, and yet they can be rented for $15 an hour. What a steal. So this comes back to, okay, so sure, there could be theoretically a job where you earn more, but the earning more has a lot of negative feedback loops that come back into it. Negative feedback loops are something from systems dynamics. They don't always mean that something's bad. They're more like a self-limiting feedback loop. You can put more energy into it, but there's going to be some other thing that limits it. So you can try to earn more, but you're going to find that first you have to invest a lot of time in education, a lot of time in networking, and because those things are costly, time, extensive, whatever, people who already have capital are going to have an edge, and there's going to be these tertiary markets where people are really competitive for it, and anytime you're getting paid a bit more, a lot more is expected of you because aren't you glad to have the higher paying job? So there can really be these like recursive feedback loops that make that not actually solve the core problems that one might have under capitalism when we don't have the time or energy to invest in our local communities or friendships the way that we might like, right? That's not going to be fixed by the higher paying job alone. When the rest of society is structured in a way where the high-paying jobs are extremely stressful, extremely hard to get, extremely hard to maintain, and basically rob you of the very things that you might have been seeking with what comes with the promise of financial freedom at the outset. So what we can do instead is we can really think about, well, sure, what do I need to survive? And if I limit that as much as possible, not only am I preparing for a world where things might be distributed more equitably, and when there's about $100 trillion in world GDP, and just to keep the math simple, about 10 billion people, that's $10,000 per person. Account away for like children and other people who are less productive. Account for the fact that some of that's actually going to be taken to be used for things that benefit from economies of scale, public parks, public libraries, public schools, that forth. But you can imagine like, okay, even if all my material needs are being met by yeah, I have like $5,000 to $10,000 a year that I could be actually spending on commodities. So if you're already kind of thinking within that framework of that's the equitable distribution currently of humanity's labor split among its population, well, if you're already kind of living within that, then you're going to have a lot more labor power when you are looking at employers, because how much you're getting paid isn't just dollars per hour, it's dollars per hour per your expenses. Right? So if you lower the expenses, even the dollar per hour can get you more. And if the lower expenses giving you back some earning power with your money allows you to have time that can be apportioned, I guess, whatever, to things that are more personally impactful for you, even if at the outset it doesn't seem like you are earning actual like money from that, even if you never earn money from something you're spending your now freed up time in, the thing is, whatever you're doing with that, you will own the benefits of it. If it's a friendship, I mean, I guess the means of production of a friendship is the other person, but it's mutual and non-transactional, ideally, in a perfect world. But, you're building those networks. You continue to be able to benefit from those networks. You don't just see a friend and when you're gone, you got that amount of friendship and there's nothing else. No, there's rewards down the line. And the same is true of skills, hobbies, interests, and even the dreaded time wasters of just playing video games or whatever can be very valuable if it's during those times that your brain is resetting, that your brain is just enjoying the fact that you're alive, and not reducing every single waking moment to the capitalist endgame. Now, what's amazing about this is that there is improvements that can be made just from some of these different choices. There's limits to it. I mean, you might already feel like, I already like scrimp and save. I already try to, live super low, and it's just, I feel you. That's why I'm a socialist. I'm just saying that a lot of the times we get trapped by the expectations around us. And one of those expectations is to always be working for a wage. And I'm just saying that that is not the smartest move when you consider that value comes from that labor. And if you're constantly having your labor value exploited, then you're over time having a net loss because you're not gaining anything that you continue to benefit from in the form of maybe, your own vehicle transportation, your own home, your own, like I have a laptop, but that's means of production. You want to have a few of those things that you actually can be making things with. And you also want to have time to apportion to the things where, like, if you're learning, again, you continue to benefit from that for the rest of your life. I mean, unless you just forget, whatever. So anyway, I hope this video has made clear this, one piece of insightful kind of self-helpy approach to just getting, your foot wet with the whole Marx theory, Marx analysis, because I think that when you truly start to observe this labor theory of value, not only does it make it easier to have empathy for people, it also makes it easier to make plans for yourself. Once I realized this value came from labor, my nebulous dreams of being a successful musician who earns a lot, I realized, that can only come about if I find myself at the center of a system of exploitation where a lot of people, publisher, whatever, editor, stagehand, supporting musicians are all getting paid less than the value of their labor, so that so I started to see it that way. And it's like, okay, so I guess I have to even curb my expectations if I don't want to have an exploitative career. So that's another example. But I just think that the more you're looking around, the more you're interpreting things this way, the overall better perception you have of our environment that we live in, economic environment, and the more you're able to make personally constructive decisions for yourself. So, wanted to share that with you guys. Please, if you have thoughts, let me know in the comments below. Try to be respectful, of course, but, we're only human. Thank you for watching. Once again, it's been Just a Thought. Feel free to leave yours down below. Thank you for watching. See you next time.